So, fellas, Bryce West, cornerback prospect. There was a time where this was like, why are we even talking about a Glenville kid, right? Ted Ginn dating back to the early 2000s when he came up. Now, the last guy that Michigan got from Glenville was, the last guy they got that Ohio State was on from Glenville was Pierre Woods. They've had other Glenville guys since then. Obviously Frank Clark, Willie Henry, Willie Earl.
Yeah, Willie Henry.
So you had some other guys that were really productive guys. That just tells you the depth of that program, that those are two pros, and those weren't even guys that Ohio State was on. Well, guess what? They've been on Bryce West in a huge way, and this has been a knockdown, drag-out battle. But Ohio State, I think Brice was able to flip it back in their favor heading into what was a pivotal official visit last weekend. And one that you talked to the other guys on the trip. I know you talked to Jacob Oden. I talked to some of the other prospects, talked to Boo Carter, talked to Elias Rudolph, and said they were all like, hey, man, Michigan, they're looking better with Brice now. So I don't know. I mean, I'm still not ready to say that they have overtaken Ohio State, but things do seem like they've gotten a little more interesting again.
I would say they definitely made up a lot of ground from this past weekend, but I don't know if it was enough ground to overcome it. I've always said I think Michigan has always sat better with Aaron Scott compared to Bryce West. I still kind of feel that way going into Aaron Scott's official and coming out of Bryce West's official to Michigan. But, like I said, I talked to Jacob Oden, a guy who knows Brice pretty well. I mean, they went to that basketball game together back, I want to say, in January during the wintertime in Ann Arbor. And they've really formed a strong relationship. Not only those two, but Boo Carter as well. And, when I talked to Brice, he said the three of us, we definitely talked about teaming up at the next level. And he said, if I were to go to another school other than Michigan, it would be hard saying no to those guys just because how close I am to them. But Jacob told me, he's like, I feel pretty confident kind of where Michigan sits. I know there's some optimism on Michigan's side, but I would say to be cautious. It's cautiously optimistic there. And that's kind of how I'd put it right now. Because he still has his Ohio State official visit to go.
He sure does. They're really working the Aaron Scott, Bryce West package deal kind of thing, and I think that's kind of resonating with those guys. There's going to be a consistent theme to these next couple of guys, at least with me, Steve, that these guys that Michigan really had to make up significant ground with, and that they clearly believe they did make up ground with. If they're going to overtake the competition, I think it's going to take getting them back on campus again. And I'm feeling that way about Bryce West. We're going to be talking about Justin Scott and Ryan Wingo. I think they are definitely in better position with Bryce West than those two. But still, with as much emphasis as Ohio State has put on him, the school that he comes from, right, the obvious need that they have for him at that position, I just think this one is going to be tough. You know what stood out to me, and tell me if this resonates with you, Steve, is the thing he talked about most coming out of the visit. He said, man, the way Michigan coaches, their coaches, the way they coach their guys up. And I think that's a real thing for these DBs who are looking at Ohio State versus Michigan. I know it's a thing for Aaron Scott. Like, where are you going to get developed? Are you going to go there and, get tire tracks, rolled over you like they did last year in the Michigan-Ohio State game where there was no answer, where you had guys wildly out of position, didn't know where to be, coach didn't know how to put them in the right spot? Or you going to go to Michigan and where you see a freshman guy come in and look like an All-American. You see a guy like DJ Turner get developed to a second-round pick. You see Mikey Sainristil flip sides of the ball and become like an all-league dude. Like, I mean, that is a real thing. So that sticks out to me. If there is something that Michigan is going to be able to seize upon, Steve, and really flip it, getting them back on campus and really leaning into the coaching advantage that it seems like they have.
Yeah, with Sainer still, you're talking about not only flipping sides of the ball. He made maybe arguably the biggest play in the Michigan Ohio State game last year, knocking the ball out of Cade Stover's hands. Right? I mean, talk about the difference between development there. I mean, you saw how out of place they were all game long, and yeah, you have a guy that switched positions, and in 1 year he's making huge plays in the biggest game of the season. So I'd say this, get the negative side out of the way first. I got to say, I think Ohio State won the first battle with Michigan in these two recruitments when you talk about West and Scott by getting the last official visit between the two schools, right? And they get West and Scott both up on the same weekend, which Michigan was not able to do either. So, but I agree fully. It's felt like Michigan's in a much better position with Aaron Scott. I mean, well, Sam, your trip down there, your stuff with him, I mean, really can't get much more in depth about what a kid wants. I mean, he's talking specifically about the type of coverage that Michigan plays as something major in their favor, right? So, and we've seen the laundry list of guys that Steve Clinkscale has developed. Kentucky, Michigan, probably before. I don't know. I'm sure before as well. But he's also such a great recruiter too, right? I mean, the no nonsense stuff really works a lot with guys. And I think that mentioning the coaching style as a highlight on the visit, I think speaks a lot to, I mean, it's that no nonsense. These guys are always being promised the world by every school that's recruiting them. But I think Michigan makes out of the types of promises Michigan makes as far as getting on the field, I think are always a little bit different, a little bit more unique. You'll have the opportunity, but you're not guaranteed a darn thing, So, but yeah, I agree. I think better shot with Aaron Scott for sure. I didn't realize Bryce West, there's 7 crystal balls in for Ohio State right now. I mean, pretty much everyone in our network thinks he's going to Ohio State. I did not know there were that many, but yeah, I also fully agree. Kid who I do not think is in a hurry, right? You got to get him back up again for sure. He's one for sure. Because right now Ohio State's getting the last shot, the last word. And I think if you're Michigan in this race specifically, you're going to want another opportunity. They need that. Did they need that response with Aaron Scott? I don't know. Maybe not as much, or we'll see. But with Bryce West specifically, I think they'd want another opportunity after Ohio State rightfully goes all out in a couple weeks for him, or next weekend for him.
Yeah, I speaking with a source close to Aaron Scott's recruitment, it's very, very clear that the pendulum sort of was like an inverse. Like on one end, early in the recruitment with Aaron Scott, Ohio State was out front. And Michigan felt like, and we even talked about this on one of the podcasts, they're out front with Bryce West. And then it's like the shoe was on the other foot. And look, Ohio State could wind up with both of them. I just think they have a tougher battle on their hands when it comes to, and they acknowledge, that's the thing. I think that's the thing that's most surprising to me. I mean, we won't kind of get too deep into Aaron Scott in this episode, but the surprising thing to me is how many of their experts are kind of like, oh, well, this is a little bit more of a battle than we thought. This isn't a slam dunk, and he really is looking hard at Michigan. It's like they know, and you certainly have a coach there in Mo Douglas who, as you guys heard on that episode, is gonna help level the playing field. He's not gonna push the guy to Michigan by any stretch. He's had 5 guys go to Michigan. He's not gonna push him to Michigan, but he is gonna make it so all of the negative recruiting that is gonna come in Ohio recruits' way if he's being recruited by Ohio State. He's gonna weed that out and kind of let the kid look at both schools on the merits, and that's a tough thing when it's a DB for Ohio State, because DBs, I mean, you look at one and you look at the other, there is no comparison. There is no comparison about secondary play and development. They might recruit 5-star guys, they don't coach them like 5-star guys, right? So we'll see how that impacts Aaron Scott, or if it impacts Bryce West. But